Hello, fifth graders. Today we're going to go over scientific notation, finding missing values, multiplying decimals, and how to do percents and decimals conversions. So for the first one, scientific notation, and it says to provide the scientific notation for each value. And we're going to go over number 1 and number 2. So first, before we get into converting these values to scientific notations, I'm first going to go over what the scientific notation is and how it's supposed to be written. So scientific notation is supposed to be in this format: a times 10 to the b power, and a represents the number of decimal, and the absolute value of it has to be between 1 and 10. It cannot go over 10, but it cannot equal 10 or go over 10. So for the b value, it could either be positive or negative, depending on how you move the decimal to which direction. So I think you'll understand when we go over these problems. So let's go ahead and do these problems. For number 1, we have 7,990,000. So we're supposed to basically move the decimal, and we're trying to move this decimal between the first two numbers, which is 7 and 9. So we're going to move it to the left in order to get there. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we move the 6 to the left. And since we moved the decimal to the left, we're going to get a positive b value. So this is our b value, the number of times we moved the decimal. And depending on if we move it left to right, it will be positive or negative. Now for the a value is what is left after you move the decimal. So after we move the decimal, we are left with 7.99. This is our a value. So to write in scientific notation, it will be 7.99 times 10 to the 6th power. And that's basically just it. So the b value is how many times you move the decimal. And depending on if you move it left or right, it'll be positive or negative. And a value is what's after you move the decimal. So now let's go over number 2 with the same thing. So the decimal point is right here, and we're trying to get it between 6 and 2. And we're going to move it 1, 2, 3, 4. So we moved it 4 to the left. And since we moved it 4 to the left over here, we'll end up with a positive b value. So our b value will be b equals positive 4. Now, as for the a value, again, it's what's after you move the decimal, so you end up with 6.2. And if you write it in scientific notation, it's 6.2 times 10 to the 4th power, and that's it. Very simple and easy. Now for the next section, missing minute problems, fill in the missing numbers. This is very easy. You can just use algebra to solve this. So you can represent x as the missing value for both numbers. And now let's do number 1. So if you rewrite it with the variable, it'll be 90,160 minus x equals 86,905. So right now, x is a negative value, so I really don't want a negative x value, so I'm just going to move. So I'm just going to make it positive to the right side. I'm going to move it to the right side. And we end up with 90,163 equals 86,905 plus x. Now, to get x alone, we just have to subtract 86,905. And if we're going to do that on one side, we obviously have to do it to the other side as well. So we end up with x on the right side, but we have to solve this out. So I'm just going to take this and just do regular solving. And we just end up with 3,258. I'm just going to double check if that is correct. And that is correct. So x is our 3,258 value. So that's what goes here. And you can basically do it using algebra like this. Now for the next section, this is just the same and just as easy. X minus 8,486 equals 66,380. So now to get x alone, we just have to add 8,486 to both sides. So on the left side, we end up with x. And on the right side, we're just going to add it out. 16, 4, 8 plus 6 is 14, and then 74,866. And that's just it for this section. For the third section, it'll be multiplying decimals, and we're just going to find the product. So we're going to go over number 1 and number 3. Number 1, we just write it as 0.057. I'm just going to write the decimal on top because it has more digits. So even though we are multiplying with decimals, ignore the decimal point when you're first multiplying. So just multiply normally, ignoring the decimal point for now. We're going to consider the decimal point after we multiply. So 7 times 7 is 49. So 49 here. 7 times 5 is 35 plus 4, which is 39. Next is 7 times 0, which is 0, plus 3, which is 3. And then 7 times 0 is just 0. Now, after we multiply everything, now we're going to consider the decimal point. So basically, to do this, we're going to take this far right decimal point here, an imaginary decimal point, and we're going to see how much far the decimal point to the left. 1, 2, 3. So decimal point moved 3. And this one is just here, so it's 0. It didn't move at all. So we end up with 3 if we add up these two. So what this value means is that we're going to move the decimal point here, 3 to the left. 1, 2, 3. So we end up with a decimal point here. So our final answer should be 0.399 with the decimal point 3 times to the left because 3 plus 0 is 3. So we end up with 0.399. Now the same goes for this one, number 3. So we're going to write 0.078 times 3. Now we know that 8 times 3 is 24. 7 times 3 is 21 plus 2, which is 23. And then 2 and then 0. Now let's do the same thing. So this one was moved 1, 2, 3 to the left. This one was moved 0 times. So if we add these up, we end up with 3. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3. And we end up with 0.234 as our final answer. Now the last section is percentage decimals conversion. Convert the percentage to decimals and the decimals to percents. So this is pretty easy. So decimal to percent, we're going to move the decimal 2 times to the right. And percent to decimal, we're going to move decimal point 2 times to the left. And I'm going to go over one of each problem. If you notice, both of them include 2, which is easy to memorize. Just one is to the left and one is to the right. So first, we're going to go over decimal. And so if you look at this, from decimal to percent, we have to move the decimal point 2 times to the right. So we're going to move it. So the decimal point is here, so we're going to move it 2 times to the right. 1, 2, and we end up with over here. So 0, 6, 6 points. And since this is a percent, we're going to write a percent right next to it like this. 66%. And that is how we convert from 0.66 to percent, which is 66%. Now we're going to go over number 4. This time we're converting from percent to decimal. And we're going to move 2 times to the left. So we have 94 here, and the decimal point is here. So 2 times to the left is 1, 2, and we end up over here, and we end up with 0.94. And that is our decimal. This section is very easy, fairly easy. Just got to memorize these. And that's it for today.